수수비 영화에는 되지 사비사 디파트먼트 오브 체크스 디 요마리스 와 이런 요마리스 디 수수 영화도 뭐 제소모 요마리스 디파트먼트 오브 셰바디아 대군장 딱간다 대왕 정말이스 와 대왕도 조사는 아주 출了背上와 뭐 출투도 놓아라 뭐좀 매수 가게 고마워 지난 출了뭐 봐봐도 춘이 차들 내 제도 양봐봐 내랑 양봐봐도 춘이 차도 멤버는 양봐도 내 제나 봐봐 멤버가 제도 양봐봐 지마도 지난 춘이 좋아 춘이 가 출투를 만들어 지마도 맞은 매수 되고 말아 춘만 놓아라 맞아 집이지 빠지는 매수 대치 좀 말아 내 지난 바스들 왕사에 제일 양봐다마도 미식이야 매수 되고 말아 내 대나시 정신이래요 대나시레스 그 영웅이 내봐 이거 탄지장 대기로 내봐 진이가 탄지 대기 그 영웅이 그는 한바 이봐 나서 봐 싶어도 영웅이 그는 한바 대다 그 진이 도를 정화를 해마도 그래서 스스로 정화 내지 서비스가 요 말이었어 좋아 어떻게 좀 어디 대나시레스 같은 뒤송자 그 진이 대달라 상판에 가서 좋아도 바가 그래서 그거 지시가 그래서 뭐라 이제도 상담에 그거 지어야 말이었어
So furthermore, all the misdeeds of afflictions that they are, and all the various kinds of negativities motivated by them arise through the force of conditions. So it means that these negativities are motivated by afflictions. So and whereby they do not have self-power. So those people who get angry or who commit negativities, and these negativities are in fact motivated by afflictions, so they have no self-power. So hence, just as it is inappropriate to get angry at water for flowing downwards, I should stop getting angry by contemplating these reasons. So here it talks about the person, they get angry without any self-power. So however, when the conditions are complete, then the anger will arise naturally. So just like it's inappropriate to get angry at water for flowing downwards and at fire for burning, the flame of fire for burning upwards. So I should think about this, then one should stop getting angry. 얘네 치시당 사실 대한 노교인가?
直接落成的.
대다기 규견 장왕제 많이 봐. 되라.
진은 좀 뭐지?
대 단답도 대파도 대시간 봐.
우리 대다기 규기 장왕제 많이 봐. 진은 소바 대다 정 제바 셔지 셈바메 이제 대야 다지지. 그러 다지지 셈바 여바 많이 내서 어디 뜻하는 거다. 어디 시지 애들마
Next outline is those cause and conditions lack self-power. And under this outline is verse 26. It says, these conditions that assemble together have no intention, I shall produce, and neither does that produced by them have the intention, I will be produced.
다기 동안에 제가 샤워 히비 리세마 뭐 땅에 맞으면 땅에 말했어. 그 땅에서 근데 님무디 집이 또 동안 대야로 님무디 집이 또 동안이야. 근데 다치에서 리세마게 요 말했어. 동안이 요한테도 주진이도와 그 주진이 상담에 또 바로 변해 봐서 상바 주진의 신에 또 좋아 좋아야 맞다 바로 변해 집이 이 주진 손에 좋아 이거 바로 변해봐 계속 대치와이나 아예 코르파 좋아 공부 치고도 파내고 누사 대체하여 말했을 때 좋아도 가고래 이 가고에 지세도 보는 모두 마시에서서 모두 제서서 선반 내장을 주진이로 쳐서 가면 어디는 선반에 네 한다 바로 비디냐 제송사다 바로 본문에 바로 비디냐 제야 해무도 지금 거기 코로나에 보면 이게 가는 제주도 손에 되게 봐마도 그런 문에 해무도 강사들이 좋아 바로 그 강사들이 간다 never change do or that is on that concept taking never change something just on maris they never change it that all my shoes as one money to do boy did some funny the call about to watch or the concept to watch maris who go
So therefore, these conditions generating suffering, such as afflictions that assemble together, have no intention. I shall produce this suffering. So these conditions that generate suffering, such as afflictions and so forth. So when they gather together and they do not have the intentions, I shall produce this suffering. And neither does that suffering produced by them have the intention. I will be produced by that. So neither the conditions that generate the suffering have the intentions that I shall produce suffering, and neither that nor the suffering produced by that or produced by the afflictions have the intention that I will be produced by that. So here there are two reasons. So first is the conditions that generate suffering have no intention, and the suffering being produced by those conditions of afflictions do not have the intention that I will be produced by that as well. So therefore, it is inappropriate to generate anger by taking as the reason the other party, the afflictions, intend to inflict harm.
that's all the so number Rawaji Gabas, that was a Ranji with the machine was thought. That didn't answer Cide. So he can do that. That's Taba Kanyuba, Denny Dunn in Juja, he cheated something Joan, Machi by the Temena, they say Joan Deva Kansi with this in Gua.
Such it is, the Joy Namgu Rawan Kiva
Or so in the Rawachi Bagawa.
And next outline is refuting the assertion that transformations are produced with self-power by the principle. So these are the assertions of Samkhya. So Samkhya assertions. And in relation to this outline is verse 27 and 28. That which is asserted as the principle and that which is imputed as the self do not arise after having purposefully thought, I shall arise. If they are not produced and non-existent, what is asserted to be produced at that time?
But the Tangiba Koran to Silver Hakana, Tangiba the Ribachi, so Shirobam Divarua, Shiroba the Tangiba the Ribachi, so Carlo was not. The Channels of the Rawanchi, so what the Sawan in your maris Logo Asra, the Channels of the Rawanchi said Sawan in your maris, then Jabba the Tigumundus Laduas, the Silver Tangiba, the Ribachi Koran Silver. The Rawanchi, Chitan of the Channels of the Rawanchi, so what someone in your maris Logo was then they put take maris, chance love at it. Rawanchi your maris, Dimaris, Logo Kosu. So Logoma, Yoris, Rawanchi, Dade, Tabawata, Chibowata, Rawanchi, and Dada Sochi, Yoris, Digi Yoris, Yore, Rawanchi, Jiti Tedala, never the Dunga so Tanchi in Juan, and you want to Digi Yoris, Rawanchi, Digi Yoris, Digi Yoris, that Ambodis, Magnifica.
So here are the assertions of those non-Buddhists, such as Samkhya and such as Nayayika. So Nayayika. So here it talks about that which is asserted as the principle and that which is imputed as the self. So here are those non-Buddhists, those Samkhya say to Buddhists. So because Buddhists refute the existence of independent self, right? So, however, then Samkhya objects by saying that you are saying that the independent self does not exist, and this is not correct, and it exists. Independent self exists. So, a self that is permanent, that is partless, and that is independent, such self exists.
That don't give a quarter of Yoris or don't give a budget. That's what I want you to da Taba, the Jibu, the Rawanchi, the Niki Dada, so was the Yoris. The Rawanchi you change the Dada Tin, you never the Dungas you want to be Yoris, Lota, Rawanchi, also never the Dungan you said, where Rawanchi Mare, Kansati, Rawan Mare, when you want to go to Silura, how do we never do it? Never chatted. That did Rawanchi, Rawanchi, Tilatin, never the Dungas, someone you want to Yoris. That did Dada, can you so was Dasa, Daki James, that is someone. 달치 샤오와 다도 취취 간디 참만 용에서나 그런 게 들리지 요래스 네 다데 가서 다세워데 맞아 레셰바 보니마 다 이치 슈사이바 레셰바 보다 줄레 마치비 따바와 줄레 마치비 따바 차미비 지고 와서 니지 강제라 쳐봐지 세미비 요코나이마 다 좀이 바니도 손 차용마 세니 이 취취 두다 된 것이 그와 대리 두다 된 것도 니지 다지 요래스 다데 라완지레스 라고라고 니지 요래스 다세워 되지 거래서 다 그런 게 바래 다 정말
So in the commentary, then you can see that the principle who possess the 5 characteristics, and the number 2, it says that harms and so forth gathered by the transformations of the principle are produced with self power, and the third one is that which is imputed to the being of knowledge and cognition as self. So here, principle and the beings of knowledge and cognitions, in other words, is a being who is a knower and cognizer. So here, basically, they refer to the same thing. It refers to the self. So principle, self, beings who is a knower and cognizer. So it all refers to the self, a self that is permanent, partless, and independent. So, yeah. So, and the 5 characteristics with the 3 activity, darkness, and lightness in balance. The first one, it says, the principle who possess the 5 characteristics with the 3 activity, darkness, and lightness in balance, right? So the 5 characteristics are, the first one, the agent, and the second one is, being an agent, and the second one is permanent, permanent, that is not produced from cause. And the third one is partless, or single, that is partless. So you can say partless, or you can say single, that is partless. And the fourth one is it pervades all world and inhabitants. And the fifth one is merely an object without the mind. Is merely an object without the mind. So these are the 5 characteristics together with the 3 activity, darkness, and lightness, and that makes the 6 attributes.
다들 먼저 바꿔보라. 다들 그런 게 들리지 요래서 오로 와서 세니
Yeah.
지지나 주다 뱀바 들리지 요래서 들어오니 다 라고기 바꿔오디 다 들리게 저런 게 세니가다 주다 뱀바 들리 또 남지 또배 남지 자다 줄어서 봐요라 또 병원이다 다 논제가 들리시와 남지 자다 줄어서 봐요라 병원도 논제가 코로나와 논제가 여러 거로 여러와도 논제가 지 논제도 들리게 저런 게 또비 있다니 파야바 칸 기와 디레스 저런 도다 좋아 저런 게 또비 있다니 파야바 칸이 받는 저런 게 좋다 장치 받아 치료 받 저런 게 좋다게 따빠서 해 말도 들리게 재미 두 가지 써리네 요만 해서 보다 오늘 니 지금 동안에 재미 두 가지 요 말은 저런 거 좋다고 하는 게 또 다르지 좋아 또 따비짱을 해 맞아 저런 거 좋다고 하는데 따빠짱도 해 말도 들리게 재미 두 가지 써리네 요만 그래서 다 아무 거 까야 되는 거 도도 것이잖아 또 지금 뭐 뭐지 좋아 내가 도도들 바꿔야 좋아 그런 게 다 들리잖아 일하라고 논제 받든지 열에서 들리지 열 로그에 지서 가서 들리 체니 취취 주다 된 거 들리기 다지 좋아 들리기 다지 들리 다 되게 왜또 안다 집 난조 자다 줄어서 봐라 아무도 논제가 했어 이라 난조 자다 줄어서 봐라 아무도 논제가 했어 좋아 논제가 싫어 들리 논제가 해서 저기 또비 조단에 약바 강의 받된 저런 그 전티게 따빠서 저런 그 전티 오게 오다서 배 마도 왜 재미 두 가지 요 말에서 들으시 요 말에서 바꿔시다 라는 거 들리지 요 말에 대다고 다 저거라다 지바래 뭐셔지보다 지바래서 들리 수고해서 그다가 라는 파다나 들리지 요 말 들리지 요 바이나 저거라다 좀보다 뭐셔고 좀보다 지바 시작을 했어 나도 도도 뭐 상황이다 지금 뭐 좋아 대다 도도들이 바꿔야 돼
당진박이 되당로이죠. 당진박이 지지엔바den서. No, 니가. Yeah. So those Samkhya and those Nayayika, so they assert that there is such a self who possess the 5 characteristics as mentioned just now, together as well as the 3 activity, darkness, and lightness. So that makes the 6 attributes. So they assert that there is such a principle or self who possess these 6 attributes. And then in the commentary it says, so that which is imputed to the being of knowledge and cognition as self and imputed to be the utilizer of objects with self-power, are inappropriate. So this imputed to be the utilizer of objects with self-power. So we need to refute such a self, such a principle, right? So for them, the utilizer of objects is independent, or in other words, is with self-power. And then when we refute their assertions of such principle or such self exists, then we say that this is your imputations that imputed to the being of knowledge and cognition as self and imputed to be the utilizer of objects with self-power. So all these are your own imputations by your conceptual thoughts, and this is imputed based on your own tenets. And this is so this is just an imputation. This is just a superimposed imputation, and such principle or such a self established by way of its own character or by way of these characters does not exist. If such were to exist, then it would be like saying that those son of a barren woman or the horns of a rabbit exist.
Rani machi barisade, then Debucheva the Kayos, Rani machi was the Debucheva Kayos, Debucheva Kayoma, yes, Rani Tapa Tapi watch other, Tapi more into the machi baris, to the machi baris, and Debucheva Yomaris, Debucheva Yomaris, that is another.
And it follows that at the time of producing the result, whatever result that is asserted to be produced from the principle is inappropriate, because that principle itself is unproduced. Because according to their assertion, they say that principle is permanent, right? So the principle itself is unproduced. So since it is permanent, therefore it is unproduced. So there is perversion, because that which being unproduced itself, so the principle itself being unproduced, therefore it does not produce a result. So since the principle itself is unproduced, therefore it does not produce a result.
Nanjo Zuda Dallas about launches and the launch be charged about the countries. Kotabirangi Suda, launch be charged about the country, charging money.
Longju Chebate,
Kotabirangi was Taba one Monday. That's the Kaya Moboy, that is a Mazi, Shidam Mogubatirua, that Anjiba, which is easy.
Yeah. So therefore, wherever so the assertions of Samkhya and also Nyayikas, so when they assert there is a permanent, there is an independent, the quality of permanent and independent, as long as they assert these, then it is going to contradict with generations or results. Is going to contradict with the production. So as long as they assert such quality of being permanent, being independent, then it's going to contradict is going to contradict with the productions. So that's why here it says that being unproduced itself does not produce a result. So similarly, and they also assert such a self is the utilizer of objects such as form, sound, and etc. So again, if again their assertions of the quality of permanent, then it's going to contradict with the utilizer or the utilizations of objects as well.
다 니바 사지 니바데 히리기 찜을 요라 로드 놓지 바가바다 던지비야 이게 시로반 디스트로와 다 히리기 찜을 서다 요라 로드 놓지 우리 에세 하다 바가고 요라 다 요라 다도 인주이 가반주와 많이 놓으세 어디 시로가 진도와 시간이도.
Next outline is refuting the assertion that the being who is a knower and cognizer utilizes the objects with self-power. And under this outline is the last two lines of verse 28. It says, since it would always be distracted to its objects, it follows that it will never cease.
다 코나게 이제 바 파시오로와 다 간다 시로 버속에 다 히리기 찜을 들어와 다 간다 프랑스 다 히리기 찜을 들어와 다 히리기 찜을 에 따바다 조 유라 따도 라완다 논제바 진도가 와 유라 따바다 라완다 논제바지 근데 진도가 그래서 하여튼
따바와 롱주요.
유라 이 따도 오라 따도
따도
유라 따도 라완다 논제가 그래서 논제바 진도가 그래서 와 논제바 들리 진도가 그래서 다 지르기 집에서 다 들리 진도바에 대금은 누워서 나오는 와 대금 말해서 처음에 다 지르기 집에서 와 이노 데비 유라와 요라 아도 라완다 데리 논지 바진 되고 그랬어 와 그때 되고 있는 데 되게 많았어 와 따바이나 요라 라완다 데리 논지 바진 이마이나 때 된다 데리 다시리 지고 데와 요 주다 다서 이제 샤와라 요와 데리 코랑 다시리 지고 데와 데리 따바도 요라 라완다 논지고 요나 요 주다 다요와 요다 주다서 이제 데 샤와라 따도 배 논지 바지고 그랬어 데라 따도 논지 바지 따도 인히 논지 가지고 그래서 와 나도 이 논지 가지고 그래서 논지 가지고 그래서 근데 되게 다서 된디 나도 배 논지 가지고 이나로 와 나도 논지 가지고 저거 그래서 와 근데 내가 이나 다 유수들라서 와 제가 네 가반 좋아 나간다 나도 논지데 유수들라서 봐서 가반 매지 그런 논지야 요때 따도 논지에서 놓으러 와 이제 근데 따도 논지 무슨 다 처음에 좀 막심을 내고 했어 말이잖아 요나 따도 봐 이어면 봐 논지고 요나 내가 저 너무 집이 뒤매라고 그랬어 요 너무 집이 뒤줄에 매라고 그래 근데 이제 로바이나 때처럼 때 난가 쉬고 놓고 그랬어 보다 나는 봐 요나 뭐 집이 뒤매라바이나 내가 논지야 요 주다 다서 요때 내가 차려도 그 논 가리째 버리 때 유진 논지가 유진이 가리요 그래서 요때면은 요때 논지 엔진이 유진이 내가 잡으러 와 내가 잡으러 와 요때 가르데 요때 가르데 때처럼 유진이 가고 그래서 내가 차는 거래서 내 차스나 저런 게 아도 논지에서 때때 난가는 거래 되게 많이 해서 왔다 간다 이라 따도 논지에서 이거 따도 논지 와서 이라 따도 논지에서 저는 대중 정보 이원 누워서 한번 받아내 와 그 정보 가르치는 용어는 요래 따도 논지는 요때 내가 차는 거 봤어 내가 차야 그랬어 요때 내가 차는데 요때 집이 요지 나 길을 집을 때 코스타 바르기 논지야 가였어 요지에 배워 요면서 요라 가는 논지야 버렸어 요뭐 집어지 해서 그래 와 저 지금 어디서 다 가야 되고 와 전다 너도 가야 돼.
So he says, also the Nayayikas assert a self that has form and is a permanent thing and assert that it produces harm and so forth. If the self were a permanent thing, it follows that it would obviously... Sorry. In the commentary it says, so furthermore, it follows that it is not that the being who is a knower and cognizer will never cease in having time to not utilize the objects, because since anything asserted to be a permanent thing that utilizes objects will always be distracted to its objects, a time when it is not apprehending objects will not be possible. So it means that their assertions, those Samkhyas and Nayayikas, they assert that there is a permanent self and there is the principle or permanent self. And this permanent self also means that, and they also assert that self is the utilizer of objects, right? So utilizers of objects also means that they also assert this self is the utilizer of objects, always utilize the objects and utilize those objects with self-power. So this is their assertions. And then we refute their assertions by saying that this is incorrect, because if you were to assert a utilizer that always and with self-power, that utilizers of objects if you assert that there is a utilizer that always utilize the object, a utilizer that utilize the object with self-power, then it would mean that that utilizer will always utilize the object, such as form, sound, and etc. And that self or that principle is always distracted to those objects. So in other words, there is no time when this utilizer is not utilizing the object. So because their assertion is saying that this self or this principle or this utilizer always utilize the objects, right? So it means that there will be no time that they are not utilizing the object. If that were the case, that when the objects such as form and sound, the objects of utilization, when it becomes non-existent, when it ceases to exist, so that it is possible that those objects cease to exist, right? So when these objects of utilization cease to objects, then the object possessor that apprehends that object would cease to exist as well, right? So if the object possessor that apprehends that object cease to exist, then this will contradict their assertions, which is the utilizer always utilize the object. So, however, when the object cease to exist, then the object possessor also cease to exist. If the object possessor cease to exist, then this contradict their assertion.
Tapi kaya de tab bebo shore nga pe chuju jawa ina nga zo riba jin pe yo ta to pe yo la lo jin ne zingre se lo de ta de lo ba ga do de nga zo yo nga do de chira yi jin de yo ma re se lo ta nga zo pe na khang ba pe ba khona ke pe ta to pe nga zo khona ke pe me do jase me do na buji jase me do ta to pe ten jin ne lo je bu re se la do yi ba ina so riba jin ta de ta to lo je se lo ba ina 다 자세메도 매사기 근데 제상지는 렌드디 다 자세메도 그런 매사디 뚫고 따도 자세메도 진지하게 놓지하게 이제 용시해요 봐. 또 무슨 두라는 수 하고로 봐서 봐. 근데 제나 지내는 거라는 봐. 저런 거 따도 배 윤진 놓지하게 주마치 봐. 이래서 나와 이나. 예. 그러나 자세메도 질 빼자는 자세메도 매사기다 사제질을 내네. 네 저런 자세메도 따도 놓지하게 요 말했어. 그래서 거의 6%요 말았어. 자세메도 이 프로그램에서 가는 오지에 스타트. 어디로? 디나시에서 다 간다.
메시지 레와이나 로 계속 메시지 레와이나 데 동 유대 요 말이.
이때 메시지 다도 로드에서 가는 거 있으면 안 가는 거 왔어. 또 로지야 못 왔어.
So because they assert that the principle or the self, these Nayayikas, they assert that the principle or the self always utilize the objects, right? So however, when the objects cease to exist, then the object possessor, which is the utilizer, would cease to exist as well. So when the utilizer or the object possessor cease to exist, then it contradicts their assertions. So similarly, to give you an example, so to better understand this, so this can be easily refuted with this statement, which is when the object cease to exist, then the object possessor would cease to exist as well. So, for example, if there is such a self that exists that always utilize the object, then, for example, when this self, according to their assertions, when this self go to a garden, and then when this self sees a rose, so then the person is the self is the utilizer of the object, which is a rose. So, however, later when this self goes to another place where there is no rose in the garden, then this object possessor that apprehends rose, in other words, this utilizer of the object roles will cease to exist as well. So this is something that we can directly. So this is something that we can directly understand. This example is something that we can directly understand. Is something that we can directly understand.
다 답이 이제 붙이바 뭐 대바 시들어와 그런 거 답이 이제 붙이기서 그러와 다 답이 이제 붙이바 뭐 대바 가야 들어와 그거 지리다 수제의 땅을 수제 이때 이제 봐 수제 먼저는 다 제대 다데 땅나는 가진 수가 내가 뭐지 가진 제가 내가 뭐지 지니 말도 좋아 다 되게 맞다 내가 좋아
So then next outline is 사지나 기술라데 답이 제북기바 밑에 바로 사지나 답이 제북라. The next outline is it will be incorrect for a permanent to generate result. Under this outline, there is under this outline, so Nayayikas assert a self that has form and is a permanent thing, and assert that it produces harm and so forth. So this is under this outline. There is Nayayika's assertions, which is a self that has form and is a permanent thing, and assert that it produces harm and so forth. And under this outline is the first two lines of verse 29. He says, if the self were permanent, it would obviously be devoid of activity, just like space.
다들 진이 들어와 면사로 하게 진이 돼서 와 다지도 전화게 다 다시 집으로 들어와 전화게 다들 간다 땅에 있는 와 따바도 몇번 누구라고 와 전화게 다들 된 디마신 나가 나기로 와 땅에 이제 들어와 그 땅에 내가 이나 그 난가기도 단 디마신 난가기도 올라와 단 나가도 따바로 와 디마신 나가 따바로 와다 전화게 다들 간다 따바도 몇번 반대라네 then dimashi nanka nashin lo then dimashi nanka de kada roa nanka gido de namju la soba da zu namju zu da la soba churang long jeba da ndebe jeba soba jeba ji ya yo mares long jeba da roa namju da zu la soba pendala da long jeba da ndebe jeba so ji de jeba ji ya yo mares roa jeba yo mares then go so de 동굴에서 가시나 그 따빙에 보러 따바로 와서 요제가 요 말에 또 따바스 와들라 샤와셰바 되는 데비지하게 샤와셰바 자원 되게 말했어 따바스 와들라 따바스 와들라 데비지에 샤와셰바 되게 말했어 데비지에 샤와셰바 되게 말했어 저런 게 따바이 넣어서 와서 땅에 이제 나도 와고 따비서 길이 나도 와 어딜라들이 따바에 보이자디 땅에 이자디 따바 이자디 그러니까 따바 앞에 샤지 된데 데비지에바 되게 말했어 데비지에바 요 말했어 그 무슨 짓하고 해서 디마신 나가더라 나가더라 게 뭐도아 나가도 따바로와 나가도 따바면서 나가도 이제 데비지에서 게 요마로와스 게 요마로와스 딘디나 시리에서 와
So he says, if the self were a permanent thing, so according to Nayayikas, they assert that self is a permanent thing. So is a permanent and is also a thing. So then from our system, then we reply. So if the self were a permanent thing, it follows that it would obviously and clearly be devoid of the activity to produce results, just like uncompounded space. So for them, they assert the self is permanent and is also a thing. And then if the self were a permanent thing, then it would be like an uncompounded space. So uncompounded space or unconditioned space is permanent, right? And it doesn't produce any result, right? So it will be this self that is a permanent thing would be like this uncompounded space that will be unable to produce results. So it would be unable to produce result. It would be unable to utilize the objects. It would be unable to experience the transformations. So because it is a permanent, so if it is permanent, then it would be incorrect to then it will be incorrect to say that it performs the activity of producing the results.
那我是明白的，但是尽量对吧？没对吧？是吧？你说就明白的，尽量对吧？没对吧？是吧？尽量对吧？没对吧的，当时我大家尽的只能这边几个是老百姓是吧？可能我大把一个开人的大了是吧？我都尽的，这边几个是老百姓尽量现在吹那样，你我买了这些油，谁比这样东西呢？谁比得了这个鞋子最近最多是逻辑，那对嘛？你得学是吧？
Next outline is it would be incorrect for a permanent to depend on condition. And under this outline, so again, they state their opinion. So however, even though its entity is permanent, it produces results upon meeting with conditions. So their opinions or their assertions is that they still assert that entity is permanent. So in relation to this outline, under this outline is verse last two lines of verse 29 and first two lines of verse 30. It says, so even if it were to meet with other conditions, what could the unchanging do? Even if when acted upon, it remains as before, then what did activity do to it?
他刚才这第一段嘛都是修的，那个看到你这几个是那个的话，进了对个嘛是呢，然后我大把呢进了去呢，这边几个是那个那个，他那里大把进了去吧没事吧，大把进了去吧是吧？大把让西大把大进，到的让西大把是大进了去吧没事，做完了进呢，这进了去呢进的了，卡开钱要嘛，他让你把搞回来了，进了去吧呢的了，你这不进了卡开钱都要嘛的是。 给突然没个决策干啥？那的可能个大比上去我就要借要嘛的是，大比上去是的，我就要嘛的是吧？到底就要嘛是，就要没法送到，这经济平吧，这钱吧就那样，这可能呗大比上去我的大比上去的满地吧送上，这可能钱吧总是要嘛的是，我大比上去我的满地吧的是，经济卡给钱要嘛，现在钱卡给钱要嘛的是，你老看的。 当然是背下来呢，我说你稍微没有支撑住了，借去了你卡子到不呢看到，你这不借要嘛是吧？你这不借要电脑去查查看到了吧？稍微没有支撑住，对了，看到去了借你是卡子到不呢？这个给钱要嘛，这不借给要嘛？那电脑去那个大把等于大的大比上去满地才的，借的靠车里满的呢，这看到卡起如果当初也要嘛的是，对了，我大把搞多的嘞。
So to refute their opinion, so their opinion is the entity is permanent and it produces results upon meeting with conditions, right? So to refute their assertion, then we say that the permanent cannot possibly meet with conditions. So if something its entity is permanent, then then even if it were to meet with other conditions such as exertion, what can the conditions do to it? Even if a permanent thing meet with conditions such as exertions, then there's nothing can these conditions do to this permanent thing, because if it is a permanent thing, it will never change. So it will never change, is unchanging, is changeless. So it follows that not the slightest can be done because the self is unchanging. So because they assert the self is permanent, therefore there's nothing can the conditions do to the self who is unchanging. So it follows that there is pervasion because so it's just like a burnt seed, a seed that is burned by fire. Then no matter what conducive conditions that you provide to this burnt seed, whether water, fertilizer, and etc., there's nothing can these conditions do to this burnt seed. So similar to this, if a self were permanent, then even if we meet with conditions, it can there's nothing can these conditions do to this self.
到底我是把的话，到阶段如果阶段的话没办法，阶段的话没办法，到阶段的话没办法，我这边偏把没些讲，偏把天气习惯，到可能的了我了，我这边偏把没些，偏把天气习惯的是老百姓呐，到第二天个嘛是，第一节吧，你的一些，你的完全康熙也是，到底村里头啊，到底嘛等到第是等到多去啊。
Next outline is there is no relationship between a permanent and the condition. Under this outline, again, they have state their opinion. So although there is no benefit done in entity, benefit is done in another sense. Under this outline is last two lines of verse 30. It says, if it is said this is the activity of that, how could the two ever be related?
다 간다 그런 게 되는 거로 다 뭐지 편법이지 편법 되게 제대로 해서 딱지는 내가 내가 막 누구로 가서 와 그 시오리 다 그런 게 되는 거로 그런 게 그냥 뭐지 편법이지 편법 되게 제대로 해서 거로 제대로 해서 되는 거이나 다 저런 때다 따방에 보서 와다 땅에 때 이제 붙여 봐서지 현지시비 제 되게 지열에서 넣어서 와 되게 지열을 넣어서 다들 바꿔오니 다들이 다단데와 이제 강시요 요 말레스 근데 진지 요스나 다단데와 이제와지 야미 다 진대진데와다 야미 대신대진데와지 요구래 예자와리네 누구세
다 진대기
다 진대진데와서지 단 데와서도 나서 니요 다 진대진데와 대신대진데와서 나서 진대진데와 네 매일 도와줘 진대진데와 도와 매일 가나 도와디 매일 좋아서 진대진데와 와
균제기 되와
진대진데와 당연히 다 진대진데와서 배는 가서 된다고 저래 세지 부마된 가서 부마다 다 진대와 세지 부마다 부마다 다 진대 다 진대는 주시나 있어야 다들 주변에야 이제 야 남자 지정고 시사 말을 와 간단 되어더니 내고 들어와 다 그런 때 뭐 라운드 뭐 뱀범제 얘나 뱀바 제그래 얘나 뱀바 시바나 다들야 뱀바 집이 되어지려고 와 뱀바 집이 되어지라 야 야미 다 진대지 되어다 야미 다 대중대지 되어지려고 그래서 얘네 가야 무슨 따라오는 거까지 좋아 얘네 되어 가야 무슨 따라서 도와디 멜티니 좋아로 와 도와디 멜티니 좋아로 와 얘네랑 대나시 조례지 되어서 무슨
공다 양기야
도와디 멜티니 좋아로 와 도와디 좀 멜티니 좋아로 와 대중대지 되어서 도와디 멜티 대중대지 되어 대나시 되어지 무슨 다 진대지 되어서 내 모든 것을 다 진대서 와서 답변에 가도봐 와서 시기 bomba다 다 진대지 되어 두고 시기 bom바지가 시기 bom바데 가서 bom바다 다 진대지 되어 다 간다 bom바데 맨날 시기 bom바데 매고 다 가는 되어 들리 되어 도도시
균제기 되와
다들 지치지야래
공다 다 진대기 되와당 니바데 균제
대신도 있어 대 중대지 되어서 대 중대지 되어서 나서 중대지 되어 사죠
대 중제기 되와
대 중대지 되어 대 중대지 되어서 가서 그냥 도와도 매내 좋아 도와 매내 좋아데 대 중대지 되어 중대지 되어
어디 타님도 다진이나 난
그것도 뭐냐 그 빼자 되는 아닌 거
대나 대중대기 되와
다 지금 신경도 빼자 놓아
대디
그것도 다 지다 저기 놓아 빼잖아 다 지다서 다 진리를 놓아서
causing relationship and the relationship of silence of nature 맞아 공다 이 대니가 되면이지
대니가 난 뭐지 변범이지 변범 되게 지고는 되게 지나 되게 지나게 누가지 부르해서 와 누가지 부르해 안 누가들야 다 진리 누가 대중의 누가지 부르해 이 각계 뭐 두서로 대니가 요 말해서
대화에는 대진이 되어 봐지 이네 따바와에는 대진이다 대니 대화 해요 말이
근데 내가 코로나 때로라 뭐지 뭐다 이 오늘만 먹고 가서라 뭐 변범이지 나 뭐지 변범이지 얘가 변범 지그랬대 변범 얘가 지그랬어 그거라 다 대기가 접어이나 나 변범 집어야 되는 거 저거래서 너 그랬어 근데 와 그냥 대신에 진도가 다 진리 진도가 바로 그랬어 얘네가 가야 무슨 거야 따라오는 바까 근데 다 진리에서는 와서 스테이지 bomba 다 진리 거 스테이지 bomba 다 진리 거
세기 bomba
다 진리 거
bomba 당
다 진리 거
다
또 지역 정말 디지털 다 지시 남이 지구를 다 돼서 지시도도 지도부서 또 지역에서 보통 거 배우라 근데 무슨 그런 거
맞아 So their opinions is, although there is no benefit done in entity, benefit is done in another sense, right? So if benefit is done in another sense, then it must have connections or relationship between the two, right? The benefits and also the principle or the self. Then to refute this, so it follows that this is also incorrect, because saying acting to produce a result of that self is this benefit in another sense, it will be related to the self. Then, and the self has no causal relationship with anything. So as mentioned just now, if you were to say that the benefit is not done in entity, but the benefit is done in another sense, then the benefits must have relationship with the self, right? So it must be related to the self. So when you talk about relationship with the self, then there are two types of relationship. One is a relationship of sameness of nature and causal relationship. So relationship of sameness of nature, such as a gold vase. So a gold vase and the vase are the gold vase and the vase have the relationship of sameness of nature. So the gold vase and the vase have the relationship of sameness of nature. So then causal relationship, like for example, smoke arises in dependence on the fire. So this self, this permanent self has no causal relationship and has no relationship of sameness of sameness of nature with anything. So if that is the case, so in this way, to refute their opinion, saying that although there is no benefit done in entity, but the benefit is done in another sense. So if done in another sense, they must have relationship, and the two types of relationship, the relationship of the sameness of self and the causal relationship, and the self has no causal relationship nor the relationship of sameness of nature with anything. So use these to refute their opinion. Next outline is, it is inappropriate to become angry upon understanding that all migrating beings are like emanations. Sorry. It is inappropriate to become angry upon understanding that all migrating beings are like emanations. Under this outline is verse 31. Verse 31, it says, hence all are governed by others, and through the power of that they have no power. Having understood in this way, I shall not become angry at all things that are like emanations.
this song tongue is that try to Kudo guide already. Because Joaquin Kanda, Juba the Jumata, Samatani, it's all about the Kudochi and that Dodo did it.
So therefore, all activities that produce results are governed by others. So are governed by others means that those results are so all activities that produce results are governed by others. Also, in other words, they are other power. And even those conditions arise through the power of their respective former cause and conditions. And even those conditions arise through the conditions itself arise through the power of their respective former cause and conditions, hence having no power to either give rise or not give rise to the results. So these conditions, whether they have the power to either give rise or not give rise to the results. So in other words, means that the arising of the results depends on the conditions. If the conditions are complete, then the results will arise. If the conditions are not complete, then the result will not arise. So, and therefore, they are like illusions or emanations. So having understood in this way that all things perform activities while being empty of being inherently established. So this is, I shall not become angry at all things that are like emanations. So this is something that we mentioned many times in the past, that while being empty of inherent existence, then they are like emanations. So therefore, I shall not become angry at all things that are like emanations. So I should also train in realizing that dependent arising, lacking inherent existence, that destroys the seeds of the afflictions. So first, it talks about we shouldn't get angry at all things because they are like emanations with the understanding of being empty of inherent existence. And then we should train in realizing the dependent arising, which is lack of inherent existence, that destroys the seeds of afflictions. So we should train in this dependent arising and lacking of inherent existence that are the indispensable antidotes to destroy the seeds of the afflictions.
That was the Sumba, that two dog with Badra, that two dog with Badilla, Kanshi, Doja did, Doba, Mishena, De La Tine, Duana, Jinchin, Jude, Marie Mess, that is Shologa Chindua, that is
Next outline is the need to counteract anger. Under this outline is verse 32. It says, opinion, what will counteract it? Counteraction would also be inappropriate. Response, independence upon it, the continuity of suffering will be severed. It is not inappropriate.
Dening Gawan to Lotores. Rangi to Tombala, Shajin Jogua, Shaji Yogua, De Lotores. De Lotos that Dendi Pony Rangi to Tomba Tela, Muriba Yomares, Muriba Muriba Yomares, Digres Roa, Digres. The Pony Rangi to be Tomba Toba Tela, Tini, the Tualas about that Numuba, the Chakundo, Majet Chiba, Sama, that Roa, they civilized. This is Nemo Duana, this is very much funny on YouTube, Pomba, Tela Tini, the Kundo, the Shanga, Tanji Sevan Julius, Tanji Pongres, Tanji Sevan Julius, the Dumana, the Sevan Jusna, the Dumana Jinchen. Chatham was to the Sevan Jusna, the Dumana Jinchen, Dumana Jinchen, what Dumana Tolo, Duma Jinchen, the corner, the corner, Tabachi, Kada, Tobachi Makini, that the Panagia, and
So again, they state their opinion, those non-Buddhists. So if there is not even an atom of inherent establishment, what antidote will counteract the objects of abandonment? Since action and agent are not visible, counteraction would also be inappropriate. Then response. So response means our own system, assertions of our own system. Then we say, the antidote and the objects of abandonment, the wrong conception apprehending the two truths as contradictory, that doesn't know how perceive action and agent with respect to objects that are empty of inherent existence. So those who do not know how to perceive action and agent with respect to objects that are empty of inherent existence are wrong conceptions. So wrong conceptions, or they do not understand. They do not understand that objects being empty of inherent existence, only then the actions and agent can be perceived. So in other words, action and agent can be perceived when the objects are empty of inherent existence. If the objects are not empty of inherent existence, then the actions and agent cannot be perceived. So because of not knowing this, then they they're apprehending the two truths as a contradictory, then this is a wrong conception. So the antidotes and the objects of abandonment are empty of inherent establishment. It follows that this is not inappropriate because it is asserted that in dependence upon the realization that the objects of abandonment and the antidotes are empty of inherent establishment, all afflictions such as anger, attachment, ignorance will be extinguished. So all afflictions such as anger and etc. can be extinguished on the basis of the objects of abandonment and the antidotes being empty of inherent existence. And due to that extinguishment, the continuity of suffering will be severed. So the next outline is summary. So this summary is the summary related to the patience of ascertaining the Dharma. And under this outline is verse 33. It says, so when seeing an enemy or even a friend doing something incorrect by thinking it arises from such conditions, I shall remain in a happy frame of mind. So when seeing an enemy or even a friend incorrectly causing harm by thinking it arises from conditions of such afflictions, lacking self-power in this person, I shall prevent anger, remain in a happy frame of mind without my mental happiness declining, and be patient. So whenever we see whether it's our friends or whether it's our enemy, so when they cause us harm, then we have to think about that. We have to think about this enemy or friends, they cause me harm, they do not have any self-power in doing this. They cause me harm, but they have no self-power because they are under the conditions of afflictions. So therefore, they cause me harm. So through thinking in this way, then I should stop getting angry and remain in mental happiness without causing my mental happiness to decline. So without causing my mental mental happiness to decline is very important, because if my mental happiness were to decline, then it is the cause of anger. So it will cause anger to arise. So therefore, without causing my mental happiness to decline, and then I shall be patient and remain in happy frame of mind. Under the same outline is verse 34. It says, if things were established with one's freedom, then since no one wishes to suffer, suffering will not occur to any embodied creature. If results were established with one's freedom, without coming under the power of other conditions, that is, through one wishes with self-power, then since no sentient beings wishes to suffer, suffering would not occur to any embodied creature. So here it means that if results were established according to one wishes, in other words, if results were established as one pleases, with self-power, with self-power as one pleases according to one's wishes, then since no sentient beings wishes to suffer, then suffering will not occur to any embodied creature. So we should understand that this suffering results arises in dependence on these causes that are unwished for. So seeing this, then we also should know that beings who cause us harm, or persons who cause us harm, are without self-power. They are without self-power because they are under the control or under the influence of afflictions. Therefore, they cause us harm. So therefore, it is inappropriate to get angry at the person. So if anger is about to arise, when you see others causing harm to oneself, then we should think about this, and then we should apply antidotes to counteract the arising of anger. Next outline is some sentient beings causing themselves harm out of not knowing. Under this outline is verse 35. It says, through lacking conscientiousness, people even harm themselves with thorns and other things, and for the sake of obtaining women and the like, they become obsessed and starve themselves.
네, 간다까지 좋아. 이메다 놀아서 봐 토바셔야 시도. 그 마히텔라 다 세체바. 근데 다 가시 때 근데 도 정시 지네 도 같이 때 좀로지 놀아서 봐 디체도. 그 간다. 야, 벤수 자상 만지고 근데 왕게 때 소소소 정시 지야 된도. 근데 지나 간다. 다 미시바. 왕게 다 간다 내가 차치 뭐서 라라라 봐. 미시바 그 때는 내가 지금 했을 때 내가
랑시겨야. 당시 노 기체도 랑시겨야.
노치 주노치도 시저와다 에다 신다 야 자상라서 같은데 야 먼지버지 여러 시지와 등도와 어다 두즈자마 간다 미시봉에 되겠어 미시봉에 때 하나 간다 내가 같이 바래 소소라 세대다 심만이가 내가 같이 바래스 어서 간디 주만이나 간다와 세대다 심만이가 내가 같이 바래 다 자소 보이나다 모이나다 소소 그나 다 먼지봉하게 때 소소소 하나 써지네 와 이제 지야도와 그래서 zaman 간다 미시봉에 간다 된다 미고지나 하루 벌써잖아 수수 제바이나다 간다 하나 내가 지사했어 하나 내가 지사했어 하여튼 어서 싫어봤더니 이거 딱 가서 타바토와라 운동 한 초마다 매나는 초마다 스스로 쓰고 내가 당와이나 도구 세워놓고 들리도와 어다도서 간다 땀 미시비 간다 랑게 랑게 배치는데 심한이가 간다 등하게 뉴하게 있다 주 내사고 레시고와.
So those people who act to harm others under the influence of afflictions even harm themselves in these and future lives under the influence of afflictions by committing negativities, the cause of bad migrations. So there are some non-Buddhist, then they believe these to be the cause of liberations. Then they harm themselves, they harm their bodies, they roll on thorns, they jump into precipices, and they jump into fire, or they burn, they self-immolate, and so forth. Yeah, or they harm their bodies, and then thinking that these are the causes of liberations, and this will only create a negative karma that leads to the bad migration, rebirth in bad migrations, and then some for the sake of obtaining women, wealth, and so forth, some for the sake of women, some for the sake of wealth, and so forth, and some others they for the sake of obtaining them, and the like. Then they become obsessed, starve themselves out of anger, out of greed, and so forth. So some people they for the sake of women and for the sake of wealth and so forth, then they kill themselves. And there are people who kill themselves as well. So. So by doing so, it will not. By doing so, these are not the causes for liberation. These are not causes of liberation, and it will not lead them to good migrations nor liberation, and it will only lead them to the bad migrations, because all these are harming themselves or harming their own bodies, will only create negativities that lead to bad migration. Not only in these lives, in future lives as well.
근데 가지고 맞도록 양 가서 도마tin 되어진 사지들은 되어진 거 나서 동원지 고시와 동원지 고시의 장세 나서 나리는 맞지 티사이 봐. 이 장세 가지고 나야니 이거는 지나다스. 봐. 근데들은 더 치고 상도와 근데 가지고 동원지 고시와 동원지 고시 그 되어도 장세 저는 방사 가지고 수지를 지나다스. 근데들은 더 치고 장세 두서 고시.
Yeah, so previously we have mentioned these 4 doors to transgression, or 4 doors of transgression. You still remember what these 4 doors of transgressions are? If you remember, then please unmute yourself and tell me the answer. And because it is related to this context, to what we are discussing right now.
Is it holding impermanent as permanent, holding selfless as self, thinking suffering is happiness, and impure as pure?
So, di kasa te chang di tata shi de na sa. Chang di tata ina de yang mi chang wa yin ba dang kasa tu nge wa ne de wa dang chang ta ina de mi ta ba ina de ta ba dang ta ina de ta me ina de ta yo ba Zimbabwe Nas.
But did Marizua, Tuanji Goshi also, Malani, Tuanji Goshi, that is such a dinner on the Russian Buchat, in terms of library, such a Katudua, Meshiba Tuanji go, said Tisha, Meshiba Tuanji go, Chile, Kachi Sinchi, Meshiba Kachilong, that dinner, so the level, Meshiba Tuanji go, Wameba Tuanji go, Nimu Tuanji go. That this such a dinner, the dinner, soon our level. Chile also, Tuanji go to the Maruba.
Another Dikada.
Kuma to tendino, si pro dino, the chia hano. Sechi pona, Meshiba on the Lodoa, Meshiba Tuanji go. You all my reward level, Wame Balodoa, Wame Pamba Tuanji go. Yumulodoa, Yumuma Tuanji go. That Tuanji go cheated the Lomadu, Magiba Tuanji go Zirwa, Magiba Tuanji go Shiva, Tuanji go Shi, go Shi Herda. But now we took a and that dinner, such a decadent sort of Leodoa. Doa, Meshiba, Meshiba Lodoa, Sikaji, Meshiba Tuanji go, Yumuma Tuanji go, Wame Tuanji go. That cheat cousin of Magiba Tuanji go, Tewa, that Magiba de Cadu, or this Tuanji go so hard, which are the picture to be zero.
So because this outline is some sentient beings causing themselves harm out of not knowing, right? And then here in this in the explanations of this verse 35, then it says, yeah, so under the influence of afflictions, even harm themselves in this. Yeah, and this word is not in here. So yeah, so
such is Doa, Stambuda, Sikachi, Meshiba one, Yoda. That will my level, the problem but the new woman walking, the dollar pin, Darhani, Tabitan, the Sema and Duata, so about the new Udua. That is so, the Tuanji go to
that's all. Yeah. So, okay, the outline is some sentient beings causing themselves harm out of not knowing. So, not knowing is one of the door to transgression. So just now you mentioned the impermanent self suffering and impure. That is not the four doors to transgressions. The four doors to transgressions are not knowing, not respecting, non-conscientiousness, and many afflictions. So these are the four doors to transgression: not knowing, not respecting, non-conscientiousness, and many afflictions. So why do I say that it is related to this context or to this verse? Is because in the outline it says some sentient beings causing themselves harm out of not knowing. So this is one of the door to transgression, which is the door of not knowing. And in the explanation or in the commentary, then you can see that those people who act to harm others, those people who act to harm others under the influence of affliction, and there is one word here as well, out of influence, out of afflictions and non-conscientiousness, even harm themselves in these and future lives. So if you have the commentary with you, then those people who act to harm others under the influence of afflictions and non-conscientiousness, even harm themselves in these and future lives under the influence of afflictions by committing negativities and so forth. So afflictions refers to one of the door to transgression, which is many afflictions, and non-conscientiousness, after the word afflictions, then it refers to another door to transgression, which is non-conscientiousness. So the three doors to transgressions are mentioned in this context. There's only one door to transgression that is not mentioned, is the door of not respecting.
But the one of the secretary to the Araji, Kachinga, Yansan Joseph, Dudama, Sawata, Senama, Icheva, Rana Nebacheva Yosef, the Secretary Kustava Chirua. The Congress Chibaro, Sinjikachi, Meshibu on the Tarana Nebacheva, Meshibu, Tanga, two get forward about the Meshibu of the Lebua. Then Dinamo was a Meshiba, Rami about the Yumuma, Diningata, Never live in Dua. But one you good.
Under the same outline, some sentient beings causing themselves harm out of not knowing. So here it mainly talks about the door to transgress, the door of not knowing to transgression, door of not knowing, and in the explanations, then it also mentions the door of many afflictions and door of non-consciousness as well. So under the same outline is verse 36. So he says, and there are some who harm themselves by hanging themselves, leaping from cliffs, eating poison and incompatible food, and unmeritorious deeds. So, and there are some who harm themselves out of afflictions through hanging themselves. So you see the word out of afflictions. So here it refers to the door, one of the door to transgression, which is many affliction, door of many afflictions. So through hanging themselves, leaping from cliffs, eating poison and incompatible food, eating or drinking poison and incompatible food and drink, and performing unmeritorious deeds. So how can it be appropriate to get angry on account of others harming me? So it is inappropriate. So it is inappropriate to get angry. So because they even harming themselves. So how could you use this? As a reason to get angry? So they are harming themselves. So if we really need to get angry, the thing that we really need to get angry, or the person that we should get angry should be oneself, because we are creating negativities for oneself to experience this suffering. Next outline is, if they even kill themselves out of not knowing, is not very surprising that they harm others. Under this outline, so in this outline, it also mentions the door, one of the door to transgressions, which is the door of not knowing. And under this outline is verse 37. It says, if when under the influence of afflictions, people will even kill their treasured selves, how can they not cause harm to the bodies of others?
this is that hina never chicken that tell a truck hard is that the
So if when under the influence of afflictions, people will even kill their treasured and cherished selves. So kill their treasured and cherished selves, in other words, is to kill their own to kill their own dear to kill their own cherished lives, to kill their dear and cherished lives. So how can they not cause harm to the bodies of others? So if under the influence of afflictions, people even kill themselves, they even took their own life, that which they regarded as very dear to them, as very dear and very important to them, then how can they not cause harm to the bodies of others? So then by holding the position that harm is unsuitable, I should not get angry. So if they even kill themselves, which they cherish the most, which they regard as very important, then how can they not cause harm to the bodies of others? So we should understand that. Therefore, it is inappropriate for us to get angry at them. So,
yeah, that is somebody that. That's somebody dinner tell a ninja, Jawari Bas, Ninja Shariba, Ninja Sharibani, a new Mochi, Tedrabo, that's a loss of Shubala, Ninja Jala Machina, Tua Juba, Chitaxis, Dua, or the Shua.
Kishla, Konda, anything, never cheva mi chamba songne, choa mi resource, never cheva mi chamba set, songne set it to Nakarina. Never cheva mi chamba songne.
The long run so to the Hindu number Chebade, the Hajari, Bujari said, Limazubache. Long of the Haja Pombachi, such a sort of long jail or Jelly. The Hindi long related, never check into the Hajari, the Tabu Bona was the Samatani, little truck, Pondocheva in Maris. The Rani, such a run, such a high jail was. The Hindi long related, never check with it, but the Hajan, Masambada, do a condition to the truck is not hard as well.
Yeah. So by holding the position that harm is unsuitable, I should not get angry, means that if under the influence of afflictions, people even kill themselves, so how can they not cause harm to the bodies of others? So by holding that, so we shouldn't get angry by holding that this causing harm is unsuitable. So we shouldn't get angry by holding that they are causing harm is unsuitable because they even harm themselves. So how can they not cause harm to the bodies of others? So we shouldn't get angry, or it is inappropriate for us to get angry by holding that they are causing harm is unsuitable. And next outline is, therefore, it is appropriate to be compassionate towards them. Outline, therefore, it is appropriate to be compassionate towards them. Under this outline is verse 38. It says, even if I virtually cannot develop compassion for such people who, through the arisal of afflictions, set out to kill me and so forth, the last thing I should do is to become angry with them.
Niji jala machin jedala tuanjua chi tasi takanda chori kumari zutama kanda niji chisa yores tarang yela pe nyaba chini kandi chumba ina de zutama kanda niji chasa jire mato yela pa chori le chesa roa li pa le loya de niji zawani ne mari esla roa kundo chesa mari pa le loya mari zutama kanda niji yula shabu esa niji yula ta seba go niji yula na seba de niji ne wa shimbo le roa 와, 어떤 세바 공부 간단히 이제 휴지 부리려고 그래. 이니 되니까 내가 좀 잘해.
So this verse says that even if Ninji gyala maki na se de tunda de kari na ji.
단 예바도 니지 제고래서
Mm.
니지 예바도 제고래서 니지 제고래 니지 마제바이나 되다라 때 파쿠도자가 치 탑치다더니 다리 그 말이야.
Gyala ne diang kazana de kaza ne kaza tung ring la de ne na.
제마 자체
말이.
자 당가서 들어 빼지 신나는 가자라 버전도. 에들이 니지
Gyalam나로.
야라나서. 야라나서. 뭐더니 가와 Rwa,
Kara midi baro.
Mandibal로 마치나 예달아 초아 쉐이 같이 가요스 Rwa 초리고 말이스 Rwa 다 초이에 나도 치다만 제다 Rwa 난준다만 뛰한다 어쨌든 이서 제로 말 고스를 받는지 잘 왜라 잡으랬어 민지 왜서
다스라 소 슈발라 다스나 디안 소소 디세바. 소소 시바로.
다 세바 가나 소소 세바 라니 세바이나다 현나기 세바이나다 간다 세지 강가라 간다 니지고요 좋아 니지고요 마도 될라파 다 니지 마제바 니지 잘라면 간다 도도바시 니지 마치나로 원 그래서 니지 마치나 대다라 초이 다시 가와지 러는 거래스 라요 말에 니지 제사고 요리해서 니지 제사고 요 근데 초리 말에서 간다 좋아 그래
Yep. So here, the verse, it says, even if I virtually cannot develop compassion for such people who through the arisal of afflictions set out to kill me and so forth, the last thing I should do is to become angry with them. So another translation for this is...
야차 자르고 이제 제마 투나 하세요. 야차 자르고 이제 제마 투바이나 다 좋아다 가와서다. 근데 이제 제마 투나 좋아다 가와서. 이렇게 된다더라. 야차를 보시고 그래서
인제 되게 마토와이나 양에 대한 토와 양지야 요 말이스.
좋아가 같이 했어. 맞지. 야차 자르고 들어가고 잘라서 좋아. 그리고 이제 인도 치. 그래서 좋아. 야차 자르고 간다 니지 제마 투나 하고. 좋아도 가와가지 제로 말했어 거죠. 제 돈은 자자 니지 잡아. 그래서 그걸 봐. 좋아. 니지 자자 레오도 좋아도 니지 가는 거야.
Yeah. So here, even if I virtually cannot develop compassion for such people, so virtually here also has the meanings of even if I am unable to develop compassion for such people, 100%. So this virtually has the word of fully, completely, 100%. So it has this meaning. So even if I cannot fully develop compassion or develop full compassion for such people who through the arisal of afflictions set out to kill themselves and oneself and so forth, to kill themselves, others and so forth, then the last thing, another translation for this word can be, how could it be appropriate? Yeah, how could it be appropriate to get angry with them? So even if I cannot develop a full compassion for such people, how could it be appropriate to become angry with them? So this is another translation for this verse, verse 38. And the meaning is, so hence it is fitting of me to be compassionate to such people who through the arisal of afflictions as explained above, set out to harm themselves, harm others, to kill me and so forth. So here it says that one should develop compassion to such people. So even if they harm themselves, even if they harm me, then we should develop compassion to them. And they are not the objects of anger. They are not the object of retaliation, and they are the objects of compassions. So, and even if I virtually cannot develop compassion for them, the last thing I should do is to become angry with them, for anger is very inappropriate. So in another translation for this is, even if I cannot develop full compassion towards them, then how could it be appropriate for me to become angry with them? For getting angry at them is very inappropriate. And here we are talking in the topic of patience, right? And patience and compassion, they are very much related. So if we are able to develop full compassion towards them, then the patience, then we will not get angry at them. So therefore, patience and compassion are very much related. We stop here. We conclude with dedication. We dedicate these roots of virtue to the flourishing of Buddha Dharma and to the excellent happiness of all sentient beings. We also dedicate these roots of virtue to all upholders of Buddha's teaching, mainly His Holiness the Dalai Lama, to live eons long, to have excellent health, and may all their enlightened activities spread in all directions and accomplish instantaneously. We also dedicate these roots of virtue to our beloved teacher, Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. May Rinpoche's holy wishes be accomplished instantaneously without any obstacle. We also dedicate these roots of virtue to world peace. May excellent happiness prevail throughout the world. May wars, conflicts be pacified immediately. May the pandemic, diseases, disaster, natural disaster be pacified immediately as well. And we also dedicate these roots of virtue, especially to those who pass away. May all their negativities accumulated since beginningless time be pacified immediately and quickly achieve the state of enlightenment.